All right, so let's go to the next panel. It's actually, like I mentioned before, Cesariak is unable to be here. He was scheduled to be here today, but he's unable to. We appreciate the brother. But let's go to Ron Devon Prospect. He is here, right here on Debate Talking Radio. Let me open up his phone line, and you can begin questions. Go ahead.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you for the opportunity to ask these questions on this panel-style showtime. And I want to give shout-out to Mayana also for co-hosting as well. I want to give a shout-out to Vocab for being brave enough to answer these critical questions that's being asked of him. I think the sisters did an excellent job. I think if I finish early, I'm going to yield some of my time to them because they had more critically crunching questions to ask Vocab. So, Vocab, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So I read your book cover to cover, and I absorbed a lot of information. One main reason why I agreed to do this question and answer segment with you as well is because you mentioned my name in the book as well as my organization. So therefore, that entitles me to at least inquire a little bit more in depth as to why that occurred, as well as several other things that you had mentioned in that book. But before I get into that, the first question I want to ask you that's going to lead into my premise is you identify as a Calvinist, correct?
Yes, I do.
All right. Do you believe that Calvinists are strict adherents to the gospel?
The Calvinism, properly defined, strictly adheres to the gospel. Any given self-described Calvinist may or may not.
Excellent, and I'm glad you answered that way. So just keep that in mind when we talk about Hebrew Israelism, a phrase that not only you have coined, but others have coined as well, and various adherents to that particular tenet of faith also have maybe a similar perspective in regards to how you would label a Hebrew Israelite as opposed to Hebrew Israelism, all right? The reason why I asked that, are you familiar with Jonathan Edwards?
Yes.
Okay. Was Jonathan Edwards a Calvinist?
Yes, he was.
All right. Would you say he was an upstanding Calvinist to the best of his ability from what you know?
I think where you're going to go is you're going to talk about his views and actions in relations to race.
I just asked you to answer the question. Can you answer the question, please?
The thing is, Ron Shields, this is about the book, and you're asking me a question that has nothing to do with the book. Please ask questions about the book.
All right. And can you not identify me as that and keep my name that is actually listed on the flyer? I'd appreciate that. Okay?
Yes, I will.
So
now on, I will do
yes,
that.
no question. So if you decline, just say you decline.
I can say, listen, Divine Prospect, I can answer how I want to answer.
Let's continue the process.
But I decline to answer.
I'm just asking if you decline the question, then just say decline. That's what I'm saying. So I can move.
Yeah, let's continue. All right, guys. We got an audience listening. Let's continue.
It's obvious I decline by my answer.
Okay, no problem. All right.
Let's continue.
So moving forward. All right, gotcha. So moving forward, you identify as a Christian presuppositionalist, correct?
Again, this is not in the book.
Let me ask the question. It is yes or no, and I'll tell you how it relates to the book.
I'm just calling attention to it. I don't mind answering it because yes, I do. But again, this is not
let me move forward. So as a Christian presuppositionalist, right? If somebody was to read your book, if they were looking for objective information in regards to the Hebrew Israelite movement, do you believe that they would automatically be able to detect biasness and how you present the information in your book?
Okay. The aspect of presuppositionalism has nothing to do with your follow-up question, so I do not understand why you use that antecedent. However, I think it's clear as a Christian apologist from even the back of the book that I disagree with the basic tenets of Hebrew Israelism. So, yes, they would be able to determine that I am biased against the claims of Hebrew Israelism from jump in the sense of I do not think a lot of them are true, although there is a section of the book where I talk about 10 things Hebrew Israelites get right.
Yes, I read that, and I also saw the video you did with a friend of mine when you went back and forth with him, Alfredo, in regards to that particular discussion, all right? The reason why I'm asking this is because when we read your book, you have a section called The Story Behind This Book, right? And you were talking about the Hebrew Israelites appeared on my radar a decade ago. So would you admit that your initial contact with the Hebrew Israelites was negative and not positive?
Yes.
All right. So if your encounter with a Hebrew Israelite group who was not as extreme as the ones that you had purported to have met on the street, do you believe that you would have a different premise in regards to writing this book?
I don't appreciate the dubious language you're assigning when you said reported or purported to have met. I don't know why you feel the need to say purported to have met. So I'm calling everyone's attention to that because it's slick language, and I don't appreciate those kind of loaded questions. But if it would have been different, I don't think so, because as I surveyed the landscape, I would have seen the reality of the matter, such as meeting people like you who claim to be moderates but really have a lot of the same beliefs at the core. You just dress it up with prettier clothes.
Now, you didn't have to say that either, because that's being slicked as well. So let's stay to me asking the question.
Let's keep it on topic about in regards to the book. In regards to
yes,
the book.
Thank you. So you taking a jab is unnecessary. So I'm making a reference to your book, and in your book you were speaking about your initial contact with adherents to what you coined Hebrew Israelism. So the question that I asked you was very simple. I said, if your experience with encountering an adherent to a Hebrew Israelite faith was a positive one, would that have affected your book in a different light?
And so my answer
my next question, because there's another page on there that I want to refer to. But go ahead.
My answer is essentially the same, which is I don't think so, because as I surveyed the landscape, I would see the reality of the situation, regardless of any initial encounters.
So if you were to pick one of the Hebrew Israelite groups that you would favor as being the best representative of Hebrew Israelism, which one would it be?
Well, remember, my book is about One West, so the best representative of One West Hebrew Israelism is clearly ISUPK. They hold the torch, and all the other camps have felt free to deviate much more than they have. But if you mean Hebrew Israelism proper, which is not really the subject of my book, it's in the subtitle, it's about One West, then if you mean best representative, as in who is the best ambassadors to the larger world, I would probably say the Israel of God, because I've had multiple positive experiences with them, again, which I mention as a compare and contrast in my book.
All right. So the reason why I bring it up, because you also just mentioned the compare and contrast. You said your book is about One West Hebrew Israelites. That is false, right? Because you have a list in there. Let me finish. Let me finish. You have a list in there of other non-One West Hebrew Israelites, and you also term some Tanakh-only camps, and you also term some Messianic or Messianic groups. So you also mention other groups in there besides One West. So that will give somebody false presumption that even though that let me finish. Vocab.
You got the whole show.
You allowed us to speak and lay out their premise. Let me do the same, please. Thank you. So the reason why I'm saying that's because it is not only about One West. It is mainly about One West as a spring dive into the rest of Hebrew Israelism, because you also mentioned the term Hebrew Israelites, quote unquote, not just black Hebrew Israelites as well. So the reason why I asked you that's because out of the groups that you actually have listed here, and I can read them for you for the audience, I was asking, of all the groups that you've listed in your book, which ones would be the best representative to you of the Hebrew Israelism paradigm? And I'm assuming you mean IOG. IOG would be the one you would pick, correct?
Yes, I already answered that question, yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So the biggest issue, one of the main issues that I read from your book is in regards to the claim that certain so-called African Americans, Negroes, blacks in America are under the false assumption that they are Hebrew Israelites by blood. Is that correct?
There's no sentence in the book that says what you just said.
No, I'm asking you overall. I'm not saying I'm quoting per se from your book. I'm saying as somebody that's reading it, this is the premise that I'm led to. So I'm asking you, for your own perspective in regards to writing this book, is one of the main issues that you have with the Hebrew Israelite community is the claim to being bloodline Israel?
No, and the book is not a refutation of that claim, which I mention The book is an introduction to the general beliefs of One West Hebrew Israelites. That's exactly what it is. It's not about contending for that. Otherwise, the whole book would be filled with the refutations for that. I don't have any DNA information in there. I don't interact with every scripture that One Westers use for that claim. That's because that's not the intent of the book. It's an introduction for somebody who has no idea what is going on and yet sees this in their community. And from the feedback I've got, people have utilized it exactly in that way.
All right, and that can be misleading. So I'm going to ask you another question because since I'm running out of time, I didn't even get to the other 40 questions that I had. But the question I want to ask is, as it pertains to the non-One West Hebrew Israelites, was there a reason in particular why you added that section if the point of the book was to address the One West camps?
Yes. So people know
what that was?
So people will know those groups are not One Westers, because what happens is people hear, oh, Israel of God, and this happens frequently. They'll assume they're in a real way connected to the folks they see out on the street. Whereas if you talk to Israel of God, they say, we don't get down with those guys who preach hate. We're not on that hate doctrine. Those brothers are lost. They say stuff like that. So the only way so people can know that is when it's listed, they're not One Westers. I'm still using them under the description, not One West. That way people understand, oh, so these are not One Westers. The book is not about them. And if you notice, that's on page 22. Besides Israel of God, I don't even talk really anymore about any of those groups except for Israel of God, so I can do compare and contrast.
Yeah, because you talk about pneumatology and other things that you have issues with them on. All right. So you have in your book, it says the main venues, quote-unquote, Hebrew Israelites proselytize are city blocks. The average Hebrew Israelite annoy your neighbor starter kit includes a mic, a platform, a few offensive poster boards, a tattered KJV, a red apocrypha, and a busy street corner. Now, when you made that statement there, that list that you also had there about other non-One West groups also has the quotes Hebrew Israelites. Do you see that as being misleading in any way?
I'm confused what you're saying. It's clear. First of all, I think that's a great sentence. But second of all, it's clear this is about One Westers. What do you mean?
Well, let's go to the next person on the panel. We're going to go to Ron Devon Prospect. All right. Let me open up his phone line. Let me set up the timer. And go ahead.
All right. Thank you for that shell slow time, and thank you for Vocab for still being on the line and addressing the questions that we have for you. A question I would like to ask you is, would you classify Hebrew Israelism and adherence to Hebrew Israelism as far as Hebrew Israelites, would you classify them as a cult or a heretical divergent form of Judaism, Christianity?
One West would meet a lot of the classical definitions of a cult. When you ask about the larger framework of Hebrew Israelism, they could just be involved in the same fallacies or heresies or errors as traditional Judaism. So that would not be appropriate, I don't think, to describe, for example, Rabbi Kapers Funyeh as being a member of a cult, for example.
Okay, so Hebrew Israelism in the general term, you're saying that you wouldn't really classify it as a cult. Is that correct?
There are types of Hebrew Israelism that are cultic, such as the One West variety. And I mentioned that in the book, how there are characteristics of cultic groups that One West Hebrew Israelism matches. In Alan Gomes' book, Unmasking the Cults, he lists 19 theological characteristics of cults. About 15 of these are true of One West Hebrew Israelism. 3 of these directly relate to how One Westers mishandle the Word of God: redefinition of biblical terminology, disregard for sound hermeneutical principles, tendency to see Scripture as alluding to their cultic movement.
Okay, are you done? Because I was going to follow up my question. I was just asking a yes or no so I can lead on to my next question.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get more context. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem, because I was on that same page. I was going in his classic book, Kingdom of Cults, Walter Ralston Martin, which you just termed as Walter Martin. So the reason why I'm asking you that question is, have you done any kind of quantitative research with the heads of One West, particularly in order for you to extract statistical data to come to the conclusions that you made in regards to your book? Because Walter Martin has done that in regards to his classification of dealing with cults and his actual interviews with individuals who are actual leaders in those cults themselves. Have you also performed the same work?
Some of the leadership of some of the One West groups are forthright with me about membership numbers behind the scenes, and then there's other ones who are forthright about numbers in public. The rest are not so forthright. So with some, you can do the numbers. With others, you cannot. And there are aspects of some of these groups who I do speak to privately and give me information and want to share their perspective. So the answer is a qualified yes, but not a total yes, mainly because of some of the closed-off nature of some of the leadership of the One West groups.
Okay, gotcha. So you're saying for the most part you have not spoken to anybody, let's say, for example, the founders of One West that you mentioned a lot. You even spoke about Ariah. Have you ever spoken to anybody in Ariah's current camp now that the Comforter was the head of? Have you spoke to any of those leaders in any way, shape, or form yourself?
The Israelite Church of God and Jesus Christ, whom you mentioned, are certainly, out of all the closed groups these days anyway, one of the most secretive groups and aren't really prominent on the ascendancy like they once were. So those conversations with members of those groups have only happened online as far as the ICGJC. And Ariah is really off limits. Nobody can get to Ariah. And there's only one other. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I understand, and you're making a great point, but the question I'm asking is, so you can say with certainty that you have not spoken to any leaders that were responsible for founding One West, correct?
Well, there's only a few left. Most of them are dead. So nobody has.
That's all I'm asking you. Have you spoken to them? Have you interviewed
like
them formally? Have you designed a questionnaire to extract information from them directly? I was just asking, have you done that level of research? Because if not, you don't think that you could have waited until you've gotten an opportunity to do so, or somebody that you know could have also conducted that type of questionnaire research before you created a book about the actual group that you're speaking of, and then you cite Walter Martin, who has actually done that, even with certain closed-off groups, before he came out with his dissertations against the cults, more lamely on shows that a lot of us may have watched, like the John Ankerberg show. I'm just saying, I don't think, I think that
General
I think
Yohana,
that.
I thought you were done. General Yohana never met Abba Bivens. You know what I'm saying? General Yohana never met Abba Bivens, yet he believes he's carrying on his teaching and speaks about him. The folks you're mentioning, really no one has spoken to some of them. And so what you're saying is actually not an option. But I can tell you what I have done that is an option. I have spoken with the leadership that will speak with me of some of the One West camps. I have done that. The current existing One West camps, I have spoken to some of the leadership who will speak with me. Now, I've spoke at numerous of them. There's numerous times I've reached out to Nate. He knows. I stopped by the school, for example, gave him a book with my cell phone number on it. He has it. I called into a radio show the next day he was on and did a follow-up call on the phone, or I'm sorry, through the comment board, actually, rather. The guy read it over the phone. But so I have try to do this, but some of what you're saying, no one has done because it's not possible.
You mean no one who's a Christian apologist, correct?
No one. No, who has access to Ariah besides the Comforter?
The people
and who has access to the Comforter?
The people that's in that church. So there's people
right, and
like
I'm not a member of the ICGC.
No, I hear you. I'm saying there's people in my community that speak to people in that church. So they would have intel and information in regards to what happens. And,
well, I've done that. You asked about the leadership.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying, as far as Christian apologetics, as far as you know, no one has ever come up with the work that you're claiming to have done. And on top of that, no formal questionnaire has been done with any of these leaders. in order for you to come to the conclusion in your book. So you're saying it's solely off of the empirical data that you've obtained based on your own personal interactions with adherents or members of these groups, or let's say secondhand, information from people that were in these groups that then relay information to you. So all I'm saying is there was no real primary research done in the formation of this book.
Yeah, that's incorrect, because I've told you numerous times I've talked to members, and so that is a source of primary information. There's no qualification. It has to be leadership. But to up the ante, I have spoken to some leadership of One West camps specifically, personally. So I have done that. And furthermore, primary source also has to do with materials written by adherents. And I reference often materials written by adherents, and have read a bunch more materials written by adherents that I did not include. What you're saying, though, is a ludicrous standard. Walter Martin never sent Mary Baker Eddy a questionnaire that she was going to fill out.
Of course not.
Walter
You
Martin
couldn't
never
have done
sent
that. What I'm saying is,
that he was going to fill out.
Have you? Yes. So what I'm saying is, in regards to what you're just saying, because I'm just trying to understand the foundational basis for your primary research. Are you saying that you've read material written by One West groups? Is that what you're saying?
That's not the only primary source material, but that is
No. But I'm asking, have you read material written by One West groups?
Yes, I have.
Can you cite them for us?
Yeah, Nate, for example, Nathaniel, has two books. One which is called Welcome Home, and the other one's an illustrated guide to the Bible. And there's also another One West book on my shelf I can grab. The problem is I'm looking at it, but it's a self-published book, so it doesn't have the title on it. Just a minute. On the side.
No problem.
All right. The Real Hebrew Israelites versus Edom and Khazaria by Tazadak Shah, for example. And that's a pretty lengthy book. So there's one as well as folks who are former members as well, such as Hannah Spivey, who was involved with a number of One West groups.
All right. So the reason why I'm asking this is because there are some people from One West who unfortunately wasn't able to be on the panel to ask certain questions. And this is a concern of theirs to see what type of primary research that you've done to collate the data that you've actually included in your book itself to present to your audience. So this is a concern of theirs, and this is questions that they would ask you if they were on the line. So I appreciate you sharing that, so that way they can get an idea of what's going on. But I think one thing that would be an issue to them or to their dismay is that no primary research has been done in regards to interviewing and renaming material of any of the leaders that you mention in the book.
That's not true. Yeah, so that's not correct, and that's not the only form of primary research that a researcher does. So I'm not really. I don't think you understand what primary research means if you're using it in that way, because that's not the only.
But I was making specifics. I wasn't talking about broad. I was saying specifics, because these are inquiries that they would have, but unfortunately they're not on the line to ask you these questions. So I'm mostly speaking about the leaders that you said helped to found One West, and I'm saying you have not done any questionnaire interviews with them. You have not read any of their material that they
specifically.
What do I mean? What do you mean? What do I mean? The people that you just finished saying that are
no, but who? Like, no, what I'm saying is, what are the names of the people you're saying I should have interviewed? Because we're talking about a vague thing. You're saying leadership of One West. Who actually, specifically, literally, do you mean that should have been
the name that you
interviewed?
Mentioned all the time? Aria.
Who else?
Because to you, to you, that's the person that a lot of the doctrines ascribe to until you've done further research and you looked into his teachers and see where he got a lot of his data from. So what I'm saying is, him more particularly, because that's the person that name come up probably the most out of all the founders of One West in your book. And this is the question that those One West groups would want to ask you. They say, if you've never had personal time with him himself, how can you represent his worldview? That would be what they would want to ask you.
You know how many times I mentioned Aria in the book? 3.
And when you mention him these 3 times, what is it in reference to?
3 of his students, Aria, Moshe, Jacob, that's how it pronounced at the time, began a new school right around the corner at 1 West 20 and 25th Street in Harlem.
You spoke to Jacob?
Now let me read the other one.
Okay, go ahead.
The other one says, with the introduction of Lashwan Kodash, Aryeh changed his name to Ariah. And then the next one says, meanwhile, the ICUPK suffered a terrible setback when REI predicted and declared frequently and confidently the Christ would come back to kill or enslave all non-Israelites to January 1st, 2000. And there's one under a low-ranking member named Tazadakia, Jermaine Grant, rose to power even over REI. So it looks like there might be 4. I'm doing it through a PDF search. So it looks like there's...
no problem. So those 4 individuals, you have not spoken to any of them, correct? I mean, you can't speak to Mashah because you're not here.
Yaquab is dead.
Aziak and Ariah.
So Yaquab is dead.
Yeah. So I'm saying that you can only speak to Aziak and Ariah. So anybody else who you claim to be founders, all I'm saying is you're not able to speak to them personally to get any information from them because, like you said in your book, there's not a lot of material that comes from the community, right? So the only real way to actually understand the founders of One West is to actually speak to anybody or to get somebody that you know personally who has had personal time with them and